The Galactic Military Academy buzzed with the usual morning chaos as cadets rushed to their assigned training modules. Among the sea of towering Catherian warriors, graceful Zilani diplomats, and heavily armored Graxian soldiers, Maya Chen looked impossibly small. At barely 5 feet tall and weighing less than most alien cadets' weapons, she drew snickers wherever she went. "Look at the little human," whispered Zektar, a 7-foot Catherian whose natural armor could deflect plasma bolts. How did something so fragile even pass the entrance exams? His companion, a crystalline Zilani named Silara, chimed in with her melodic voice. Perhaps they lowered the standards for her species. Humans are known for their persistence, if nothing else. Maya pretended not to hear as she made her way to combat strategy class. She had heard variations of these comments for 3 months now, ever since arriving at the academy. The other cadets saw her as a novelty at best, a liability at worst. Even the instructors seemed puzzled by her presence. Professor Vexnell, a battle-scarred Graxian veteran, stood before the tactical display showing a complex space battle scenario. His forearms gestured at the holographic fleet formations, while his compound eyes scanned the room. "Today we analyze the Battle of Kepler's Grave," he announced in his gravelly voice. The hegemony's finest admirals faced off against rebel forces in what many consider the most tactically challenging engagement of the century. Who can identify the critical error that led to the hegemony's defeat? Several hands shot up immediately. Zektar's massive arm dominated the others. "Sir, Admiral Thexvar deployed his dreadnoughts too early, leaving his flanks exposed to the rebel surprise attack." "Correct, but incomplete," Vexnell replied. "The deployment was indeed premature, but what specific tactical principle did he violate?" More hands rose. Silara's crystalline form sparkled as she spoke. "He ignored the fundamental rule of maintaining reserve forces for unexpected developments. Better, but still missing the core issue." The professor's eyes swept the room, landing on Maya, who sat quietly in the back row. "Cadet Chen, you haven't participated. What's your assessment?" The room fell silent. Maya could feel dozens of alien eyes turning toward her, some curious, others openly amused. She stood slowly, her heart pounding. Professor Admiral Thexvar didn't just violate reserve principles. He fundamentally misunderstood his enemy. Her voice was steady despite her nerves. The rebels weren't trying to win a traditional engagement. They were forcing him to reveal his entire battle doctrine for future encounters. Vexnell's antennae twitched with interest. "Elaborate." Maya moved to the display, her small frame dwarfed by the massive tactical projection. "Look at the rebel formation here." She pointed to a seemingly chaotic cluster of ships. "It appears disorganized, but it's actually designed to test every possible hegemony response." When Thexvar committed his reserves, he wasn't just losing ships. He was teaching the rebels how the entire hegemony navy thinks. The professor's forearms crossed as he studied the display with new eyes. "An interesting perspective. But surely you're not suggesting the rebels sacrifice thousands of their own people just for intelligence gathering?" "That's exactly what I'm suggesting," Maya replied firmly. "Sometimes the most important victory isn't the battle you win, but the war you prepare for. The rebels lost this engagement, but they gained something more valuable: complete knowledge of hegemony tactics." An uncomfortable murmur rippled through the classroom. The idea that anyone would willingly accept massive casualties for long-term strategic advantage seemed alien to most species represented here. Zektar's laugh boomed across the room. "Typical human thinking. You see sacrifice and loss everywhere because your species is weak. Strong races like the Catherians would have simply overwhelmed the rebels with superior firepower. And that," Maya said quietly, "is why humans consistently outperform Catherians in simulation exercises." The room erupted. Zektar rose to his full height, his natural armor plates flaring with anger. "Outperform? Your species barely qualifies for military service. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced abilities." Maya didn't flinch. "You're right. We don't have natural advantages. That's exactly why we win." Professor Vexnell raised 2 of his arms for silence, his compound eyes fixed on Maya with newfound respect. "Explain your reasoning, Cadet Chen." "Every species here relies on their natural gifts," Maya continued, her confidence growing. "Catherians trust their armor and strength. Zilanists depend on their speed and psychic abilities. Graxians use their multiple appendages and tactical processing. But humans? We have to think our way out of every problem because we don't have any other choice. She turned back to the tactical display. In simulation after simulation, human cadets achieve victory rates 30% higher than any other species. Not because we're stronger or faster or better armored, because we're desperate enough to try things that seem impossible to everyone else. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Zektar seemed stunned by the quiet conviction in her voice. Silara's crystalline form pulsed with uncertainty. But surely natural advantages count for something in real combat. They do, Maya agreed. Right up until you face an enemy who's willing to do things you never imagined. Then your advantages become predictable patterns that can be exploited. Professor Vexnell studied the human cadet with all four eyes. In 30 years of teaching, he had never heard such a coldly analytical assessment from someone so young. Most cadets bragged about their species' strengths. This small human seemed almost apologetic about humanity's weaknesses, yet somehow turned them into tactical advantages. Cadet Chen, he said slowly, report to Advanced Strategic Planning tomorrow. I'm recommending you for accelerated placement. The gasps from other cadets filled the room. Advanced Strategic Planning was reserved for final-year students with exceptional records. No first-year cadet had ever been recommended for early placement. As Maya gathered her materials, she could feel the atmosphere in the room shifting. The casual dismissal was being replaced by something else. Wariness, perhaps even a hint of fear. For the first time since arriving at the academy, her fellow cadets weren't looking at her like a harmless curiosity. They were looking at her like a potential threat. Walking out of the classroom, Maya allowed herself a small smile. Let them underestimate humans. Let them focus on strength and speed and natural weapons. She would focus on what really mattered in warfare. Understanding your enemy better than they understood themselves. The real test would come soon enough. The Advanced Strategic Planning classroom felt different from the regular courses Maya had attended. Larger, more serious, with holographic displays that could simulate entire star systems. As she entered, conversations died and heads turned. Most of the cadets here were in their final year, some already bearing the marks of specialized training in their chosen military branches. Commander Thassara, an elderly Zilani with scarred crystal formations indicating extensive combat experience, stood at the center of the room. Her psychic abilities were legendary. She could coordinate multiple fleet actions simultaneously through direct mental links with ship commanders. Today we begin the Crucible simulation, she announced. You will be divided into teams and given command of actual military scenarios from recent conflicts. Your decisions will be evaluated not just for tactical soundness, but for strategic thinking that extends beyond immediate battlefield concerns. Maya found herself assigned to Team 7, along with 3 final-year cadets who looked less than thrilled with their new teammate. Keptos was a Graxian whose multiple arms allowed him to manage complex logistical operations. Villani was a Catherian specialist in assault tactics. The third member, Jixmar, belonged to a silicon-based species called the Nethrix, known for their ability to process vast amounts of data simultaneously. Great, muttered Villani as they gathered around their assigned workstation. We get the first-year human. This should be interesting. Keptos was more diplomatic. Perhaps we can assign her to handle supply logistics while the rest of us manage actual strategy. Maya said nothing as the scenario loaded. The holographic display showed a star system called Meridian's Edge, where a human colony ship carrying 50,000 civilians had been attacked by raiders. The colonists had taken refuge on a barely habitable moon, while the raiders controlled the system's main shipping lanes. Your mission, Commander Thassara explained, is to plan and execute a rescue operation using the available fleet assets. You have 72 hours to develop your strategy before presenting to the review board. The other teams immediately began intense discussions, their members arguing over fleet formations and attack vectors. Team 7 started more cautiously. The raiders have superior numbers, Jixmar observed, his silicon body flickering as he processed the data. 16 combat vessels versus our allocated 12. Conventional engagement would result in unacceptable losses. Villani's armored form shifted impatiently. Then we go in fast and hard. Hit their command ship first, disrupt their coordination. That might work, Keptos agreed, manipulating the display with all 4 arms. If we concentrate our firepower and accept some casualties, we could break their formation. Maya studied the scenario silently while her teammates planned. Something bothered her about the setup, but she couldn't immediately identify what. The colony ship, she said finally. How long has it been stranded? Filani barely glanced at her. 3 weeks? What does that matter? Our job is to rescue them, not take a history lesson. 3 weeks is a long time for 50,000 people on a barely habitable moon, Maya continued. What are they eating? How are they maintaining life support? Where are they getting water? Keptos paused his planning. The scenario briefing mentions they salvaged supplies from their ship. Not nearly enough for 50,000 people for 3 weeks, Maya insisted. She pulled up additional data files that the other teams seemed to be ignoring. Look at the cargo manifests. This was a colonial expedition, not a military operation. They would have agricultural equipment, terraforming supplies, long-term infrastructure materials. Jixmar's crystalline form brightened with interest. Are you suggesting they've begun establishing permanent settlements? I'm suggesting, Maya said carefully, that after 3 weeks they might not want to be rescued. The silence that followed was profound. Filani stared at the small human as if she had grown a second head. That's insane, the Catherian said flatly. Of course they want to be rescued. They're civilians under attack. Maya pulled up more detailed scans of the moon's surface. Look at the heat signatures. These aren't temporary refugee camps. They're building permanent structures. And see these patterns? They're organizing defensive positions. So they're trying to protect themselves, Keptos said. That's natural. No, Maya shook her head. They're not building defenses against the raiders. Look at the positioning. These fortifications face the landing zones where rescue ships would arrive. The realization hit the team like a physical blow. Jixmar's data processing accelerated, confirming Maya's analysis. The colonists weren't hiding from the raiders, they were working with them. It's a trap, Filani whispered. The whole rescue scenario is designed to lure in military vessels. Maya nodded grimly. Think about it logically. These raiders have been operating in this sector for months, but they've never attacked a colony ship before. Too much risk, not enough profit. Unless the colonists offered them something better than mere plunder. Military vessels, Keptos said, understanding dawning. Ships, weapons, trained personnel. Much more valuable than civilian cargo. But why would colonists turn against their own government? Jixmar asked. Maya had been thinking about that too. She pulled up the colony ship's original destination and charter documents. They weren't just any colonists. They were political dissidents, families of convicted traitors, people being forcibly relocated to prevent civil unrest. The pieces fell into place. The government hadn't been trying to establish a new colony. They had been getting rid of problematic citizens. The colonists had every reason to hate the system that exiled them. So what do we do? Filani asked. If it's a trap, we can't just send the fleet in. We have several options, Maya said, manipulating the tactical display. We could expose the trap and recommend a siege scenario. We could try to turn the colonists against the raiders, or... She paused, realizing her teammates were staring at her with expressions she had never seen before. Not dismissal or amusement, but genuine concern, or, Keptos prompted. Or we could turn the trap against itself, Maya finished quietly. Let them think their plan is working, then use their expectations against them. You're talking about sacrificing the initial rescue fleet, Jixmar said, his silicon form dimming with distress. I'm talking about making them think we're falling for their trap while actually setting one of our own, Maya corrected. The raiders and colonists expect us to arrive with overwhelming force. Instead, we arrive with something that looks overwhelming, but is actually bait for a much larger operation. Over the next 2 days, Team 7 developed a strategy unlike anything the other teams proposed. While their competitors planned direct assaults or siege tactics, Maya's team created an elaborate deception that would turn the enemy's trap into their own destruction. When presentation day arrived, the other teams went first. Each proposed variations on the same theme: identify the enemy's weaknesses and exploit them through superior firepower or tactical maneuvering. Then Team 7 took the stage. Our analysis indicates this is not a rescue scenario, Maya began, her small voice carrying clearly through the large classroom. It's a trap designed to capture military assets by using fake civilians as bait. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Even Commander Thasara's crystalline features shifted with surprise. As Maya outlined their strategy, the murmurs died away. By the time she finished, the classroom was completely silent. Questions? Commander Thasara asked finally. A final-year Cytherian raised his hand. Cadet Chen, your strategy requires accepting the complete loss of the initial rescue force. How do you justify sacrificing military personnel? Maya's answer was immediate and cold. Sometimes the only way to save lives is to appear willing to lose them. The enemy expects us to value our forces more than victory. That expectation becomes their weakness. Another cadet asked, but what if you're wrong about the colonists? Then our backup plans activate automatically and we proceed with a conventional rescue, Maya replied. But I'm not wrong. Humans understand betrayal better than most species because we've had more practice dealing with it. When the evaluation concluded, Team 7 received the highest score in the exercise's history, but Maya noticed that her teammates looked troubled rather than pleased. Walking back to her quarters, she wondered if winning had been worth it. For the first time since arriving at the academy, her fellow cadets weren't laughing at her, but she wasn't sure their new respect was an improvement. The emergency alarm cut through the academy's peaceful morning routine like a plasma blade through hull plating. Maya woke instantly, her military training kicking in as red lights bathed her small dormitory room. The announcement that followed made her blood run cold. All senior cadets report to Emergency Deployment Bay 7 immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Maya pulled on her uniform, her mind racing. Emergency deployments only happened during actual conflicts, and senior cadets were only called up when the situation was desperate. She wasn't technically a senior cadet, but her recent advancement to accelerated classes might qualify her. The deployment bay was chaos. Hundreds of cadets from different species milled around massive transport vessels while instructors shouted orders. Maya found herself caught in the crowd, unsure whether she belonged here. Chen, Commander Thasara's psychic voice cut through the noise directly into Maya's mind. Report to Transport 7 immediately. Maya pushed through the crowd toward the designated vessel. As she approached, she saw familiar faces from her advanced strategic planning class, along with some of the Academy's most promising final-year cadets. This wasn't a training exercise. These were the best students the Academy had to offer. Admiral Korvextar himself stood before the assembled group. The legendary Graxian commander had lost 2 of his 4 arms in the Battle of Crimson Nebula, but his remaining appendages moved with deadly precision as he manipulated the holographic briefing display. Cadets. His gravelly voice commanded instant attention. 6 hours ago, the independent colony of New Geneva sent a distress signal. They report incoming hostile forces of unknown origin, estimated to arrive within 36 hours. The nearest military fleet is 72 hours away. The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. The Academy's cadets were being sent to defend a colony against an enemy they might not be able to defeat. You're not being sent as soldiers, Admiral Korvextar continued. You are being sent as observers and analysts. Your mission is to assess the threat, gather intelligence, and provide strategic recommendations for the main fleet when it arrives. A Cytherian cadet named Rextor raised his massive arm. Sir, what about the colonists? Are we authorized to provide defensive assistance? The Admiral's compound eyes fixed on the cadet. You are authorized to take any action necessary to preserve human life and gather intelligence. Interpret that however your conscience dictates. As the briefing continued, Maya found herself studying the tactical data with growing unease. New Geneva was a peaceful agricultural colony with minimal defenses. The incoming threat showed energy signatures unlike anything in the Academy's databases. Worse, the colony's location made it strategically valuable. It controlled a major shipping lane that connected 3 different star systems. Cadet Chen, Admiral Korvextar's voice interrupted her analysis. Step forward. Maya moved to the front of the group, acutely aware that she was the youngest person present. The Admiral studied her with all 4 eyes. Your recent performance has been notable, he said carefully. I'm placing you in charge of strategic analysis for this mission. The gasps from other cadets were audible. Several final-year students who had trained for years looked stunned. Maya felt her own shock but forced herself to remain calm. Sir, I'm honored, but this is not open for discussion. The Admiral cut her off. In recent simulations, your analytical accuracy has exceeded that of seasoned officers. Whether the other cadets like it or not, you're the best strategic mind in this group. As the transport lifted off from the Academy, Maya found herself isolated in the analysis section, while other cadets huddled in their own groups. She could hear whispered conversations, complaints about human favoritism, speculation about her real qualifications. But as the hours passed and they approached New Geneva, something changed. One by one, cadets began approaching her workstation, offering data, asking questions, seeking her opinion on tactical scenarios. Jixmar was first. The Nethrix's silicon form flickered as he processed incoming sensor data. Maya, these energy signatures don't match any known weapon systems. What do you think we're dealing with? Maya studied the readings, her human pattern recognition abilities working overtime. It's not what they're using that worries me. It's how they're using it. Look at these formation patterns. She highlighted specific data points. Every other species we've encountered fights according to their biological advantages. But these formations suggest something different. They're not optimizing for strength or speed or natural weapons. What are they optimizing for? Asked Vellani, the Cytherian who had been most critical of Maya's inclusion. Learning, Maya said quietly. Every maneuver they've made has been designed to test different responses from the colony's defenses. They're not trying to conquer New Geneva quickly. They're using it as a laboratory to study human defensive tactics. The implications sank in slowly. Keptos manipulated the display with all four arms, highlighting the enemy's approach vectors. If they're studying human tactics, then they're preparing for a larger conflict. Exactly, Maya confirmed. New Geneva isn't their target. It's their classroom. When they arrived at the colony, Maya's analysis proved disturbingly accurate. The enemy vessels maintained a perfect distance from New Geneva's defenses, just close enough to provoke responses but too far away to be effectively engaged. Every time the colonists adjusted their defensive positions, the enemy ships shifted accordingly, as if taking notes. It's like they're conducting experiments, observed Commander Yalkrin, the mission's senior officer, testing different approaches to see how humans react. Maya watched the tactical display with growing dread. They're not just studying defensive reactions. Look at the timing patterns. They're learning how humans make decisions under pressure. What do you recommend? Commander Yalkrin asked. Maya hesitated. Her recommendation would affect thousands of lives, both in the colony below and in the ships around her. The weight of responsibility felt crushing. We give them something unexpected to study, she said finally. Every human tactical response they've observed has been reactive. We respond to threats. But what if we didn't? Explain, the commander demanded. We ignore them completely, Maya said. No defensive adjustments, no repositioning, no response at all. We behave as if they aren't there. The bridge fell silent. Commander Yalkrin's antennae twitched with confusion. That makes no tactical sense. They could attack at any moment. That's exactly why it might work, Maya insisted. They're studying human responses to threats. But how do you study something that doesn't respond? It breaks their experimental model, or it gives them a perfect opportunity to destroy the colony, Vellani pointed out. Maybe, Maya admitted, but consider the alternative. Every conventional response we've tried has given them more data. Eventually, they'll have learned enough to defeat any human defense. This might be our only chance to disrupt their intelligence gathering. Commander Yalkrin studied the tactical display for long minutes. Finally, he activated the communication system. New Geneva Colony, this is Academy Vessel Determination. Maintain current defensive positions. Do not adjust your posture regardless of enemy movements. Repeat, maintain current positions. The response from the colony was immediate and confused. Determination, are you insane? Those ships are obviously preparing for an attack. Maintain current positions, the commander repeated firmly. Trust us. What happened next defied every tactical manual in the galaxy. The enemy ships, apparently frustrated by the lack of response, began more aggressive maneuvers. They moved closer, performed complex attack formations, even targeted empty space near the colony with warning shots. The colonists and Academy cadets maintained their positions. After 12 hours of increasingly desperate attempts to provoke a response, something remarkable happened. The enemy ships began to retreat. They're withdrawing, Jixmar announced, his silicon form blazing with excitement. Energy signatures indicate they're returning to their original position. Maya felt no satisfaction. They're not retreating. They're regrouping. We've disrupted their current experiment, but they'll adapt. What do you mean? Commander Yalkrin asked. I mean, we've bought time, nothing more, Maya replied grimly. They came here to study human tactics. We showed them that humans are capable of completely ignoring conventional tactical thinking. Now they'll design new experiments to account for that. As if responding to her words, new contacts appeared on the sensor display. More ships, different configurations. Approaching from multiple vectors. The real test is just beginning, Maya said quietly. She looked around the bridge at the alien faces staring at her with a mixture of respect and fear. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped being the joke cadet they laughed at. Now she was the human they turned to when normal thinking wasn't enough, and that terrified her more than any enemy fleet. The second wave of enemy ships arrived with a formation that made Maya's stomach clench with recognition. These weren't the same vessels that had withdrawn earlier. These ships moved with purpose, their approach pattern suggesting they had learned from the previous encounter. 37 vessels, Jixmar reported, his silicon form flickering rapidly as he processed the incoming data. Multiple ship classes, energy signatures suggest at least 4 different technological bases. Maya studied the tactical display with growing dread. They're not just studying us anymore. They're implementing what they learned. Commander Yalkrin leaned over her shoulder. Explain. Look at their formation, Maya pointed to the holographic display. They're approaching from vectors that make conventional human responses impossible. If we strengthen our right flank, we expose our left. If we pull back to defensive positions, we give them control of the shipping lanes. Every option we have plays into their hands. So what do? Vellani asked. The Catherian's natural armor was flexing unconsciously, a sign of extreme stress. Maya was quiet for several minutes, her mind racing through possibilities. Finally, she spoke. We do something that violates every principle of military strategy, which is, Commander Yalkrin prompted, we split our forces and attack in multiple directions simultaneously. The bridge erupted in protests. Keptos gestured with all 4 arms. Maya, that's suicide. Divided forces are defeated forces. It's the most basic rule of warfare. Exactly, Maya said calmly. Which is why they won't expect it. Their entire strategy is based on predicting rational responses. But what if we respond irrationally? Commander Yalkrin studied the display. Even if surprise works initially, we'll be overwhelmed. 37 ships against our 12 with forces divided? The mathematics are impossible. The mathematics assume they understand what we're doing, Maya corrected. But what if our irrational response serves a rational purpose they can't see? She manipulated the tactical display, showing their ships splitting into 4 separate groups. We're not trying to defeat them in conventional combat. We're trying to force them into a situation where their advantages become meaningless. How? Jixmar asked. Maya highlighted specific positions around New Geneva. The colony sits at the intersection of 3 shipping lanes. Those lanes are protected by automated defense platforms. Old technology, not very powerful, but they respond to any vessel that doesn't transmit proper identification codes. Understanding began to dawn on several faces. Commander Yalkrin's compound eyes widened. You want to drive them into the defense platforms? Not drive them, Maya corrected. Trick them into driving themselves. If we split our forces and attack from multiple vectors, they'll naturally try to maintain formation cohesion. Their response will be to consolidate their ships in the space between the shipping lanes, which happens to be where the defense platforms have overlapping coverage, Vellani said, her tone shifting from criticism to grudging admiration. But that requires perfect timing, Keptos pointed out. If we're off by even a few minutes, they'll realize what we're doing and avoid the trap. Then we don't give them time to think, Maya said. We make our attack so aggressive and seemingly desperate that they react instinctively instead of analytically. Commander Yalkrin was quiet for a long moment. Cadet Chen, you're asking me to order what appears to be a suicide attack based on a plan that requires our enemies to make exactly the mistakes you're counting on them to make. Yes, sir, Maya replied simply. And if you're wrong, then we lose, Maya admitted. But if we try conventional tactics against an enemy that's been studying our conventional tactics, we lose anyway. At least this way, we have a chance. The commander studied the young human cadet for several seconds. In her face, he saw something that reminded him of the greatest military minds he had encountered in 30 years of service. Not confidence, but a cold acceptance of necessity. All ships, he announced over the communication system, Implement attack pattern Omega-7. Divide into assigned groups and prepare for multi-vector assault. Sir? Came the confused voice of Captain Rixtal from one of the escort vessels. Omega-7 isn't a recognized attack pattern. It is now, Commander Yalkrin replied. Follow the tactical markers I'm transmitting, and prepare for close-quarters combat. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Maya's life. She watched the tactical display as their small fleet split apart, each group heading for what appeared to be certain destruction. The enemy ships reacted exactly as she had predicted, consolidating their formation to maintain mutual support. They're moving into position, Jixmar reported. Convergence point in 30 seconds. Maya held her breath. Everything depended on the next few moments. Defense platforms activating, Villani announced. They're targeting the largest concentration of unidentified vessels. The tactical display erupted with weapons fire as ancient but still deadly defense platforms opened fire on the enemy fleet. Caught between the attacking Academy ships and the automated defenses, the enemy formation dissolved into chaos. Direct hit on their command vessel, Keptos reported excitedly. Multiple secondary explosions across their fleet, but Maya wasn't celebrating. Something was wrong. The enemy ships were taking damage, but their response wasn't panicked. If anything, they seemed to be adapting too quickly. Commander, she said urgently, we need to withdraw immediately. What? Why, we're winning! No, we're not, Maya said, her voice tight with realization. Look at their damage patterns. They're taking hits in non-critical areas while protecting their main systems. They're still learning. As if summoned by her words, the enemy ships began a coordinated withdrawal, but instead of fleeing, they repositioned themselves just outside the defense platform's range and began systematic bombardment of the Academy vessels. They used us, Maya whispered in horror. The whole engagement was another experiment. They wanted to see how we'd use the defense platforms. The battle turned quickly. The enemy ships, having learned what they needed, began picking apart the Academy fleet with clinical precision. One by one, the escort vessels reported critical damage. All ships retreat to minimum safe distance, Commander Yalkrin ordered. Prepare for emergency evacuation procedures. As the Academy fleet limped away from New Geneva, Maya stared at the tactical display in defeat. Her brilliant strategy had been turned against them. Worse, she had given the enemy exactly the information they needed to defeat similar tactics in the future. Maya, Jixmar said quietly, it wasn't your fault. The plan was sound. The plan was exactly what they wanted, Maya replied bitterly. I thought I was being unpredictable, but I was just giving them new data to analyze. Commander Yalkrin approached her station. Cadet Chen, you could not have known. I should have known, Maya interrupted. This is what humans do. We adapt, we learn, we turn our enemies' expectations against them. But what happens when we face an enemy that does the same thing, only better? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Around the bridge, cadets who had begun to see Maya as some kind of tactical genius now looked uncertain. The main fleet will arrive in 36 hours, Commander Yalkrin said finally. We'll have time to analyze what we've learned and prepare new strategies. Maya nodded, but privately she doubted it would matter. They were facing an enemy that learned faster than they could adapt. Every strategy they developed would be countered before they could implement it. Looking out at the stars, she wondered if humanity had finally met its match. An enemy that could outthink them, outadapt them, and turn their greatest strength, their unpredictability, into a weakness. For the first time since arriving at the Academy, Maya felt truly afraid, not for herself but for what would happen when these creatures finished studying humanity and decided to put their knowledge to use. The main fleet arrived at New Geneva exactly 36 hours later, and Maya watched from the observation deck as massive dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace. Admiral Korvexter's flagship, the Indomitable Will, commanded a force that should have been more than sufficient to handle any threat, but Maya felt no relief. Impressive sight, Commander Yalkrin said, joining her at the viewing port. 43 ships, including 6 dreadnoughts. Enough firepower to level a planet. It won't be enough, Maya said quietly. The commander studied her profile. You've been saying that for the past day and a half. What makes you so certain? Maya turned from the window to face him. Because they're not here to fight a conventional battle. They're here to complete their education. Before the commander could respond, the communication system crackled to life. All Academy vessels report to the Indomitable Will immediately. Senior staff and cadet analysis teams to Conference Room 7. The massive conference room aboard the flagship was filled with military officers from a dozen different species. Maya felt impossibly small as she took her assigned seat among admirals and commodores whose combat experience spanned decades. Admiral Korvekstar stood at the head of the table, his remaining two arms manipulating a complex holographic display showing the current tactical situation. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various classifications, we face an unprecedented situation. Our enemy has withdrawn to the edge of the system but shows no signs of leaving. Intelligence suggests they are continuing to gather data about our capabilities. General Thisara, a massive Catherian whose natural armor bore the scars of countless battles, leaned forward. With respect, Admiral, 43 ships should be more than sufficient to deal with whatever they're studying. I recommend immediate full-scale assault. That would be exactly what they're expecting, Maya said, her voice cutting through the murmur of agreement that followed the general's statement. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to the small human cadet who had just contradicted one of the galaxy's most respected military leaders. Admiral Korvekstar's compound eyes fixed on Maya. Explain. Cadet Chen. Maya stood, her heart pounding but her voice steady. Generals, admirals, you're all thinking about this as a military problem. How do we deploy our forces? What attack patterns should we use? How do we maximize our advantages? But that's not the question we should be asking. Then what question should we be asking? General Thisara demanded. Why are they here at all? Maya replied. New Geneva has no strategic value beyond its shipping lanes. It has no rare resources, no advanced technology, no military significance. So why would an unknown alien species commit this many resources to studying it? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Admiral Korvekstar spoke. Continue your analysis, Cadet. Maya activated the holographic display highlighting the enemy positions. They're not studying New Geneva. They're studying us, every species represented in this room. Our tactics, our decision-making processes, our responses to different types of pressure. To what end? Asked Commodore Velthash, a Graxian whose cybernetic implants marked him as a strategic analysis specialist. To design the perfect weapon against each of us, Maya said simply. Look at their ship formations. They're not optimized for any single type of combat. Instead, they're modular, adaptable. They can reconfigure based on whatever opponent they're facing. She manipulated the display to show historical battle footage. Catherian tactics rely on overwhelming force and direct assault. Graxian strategies emphasize coordination and technological superiority. Zalani approaches focus on psychological warfare and information control. Human methods depend on unpredictability and adaptive thinking. Your point? General Thisara asked impatiently. My point is that every species fights according to its nature. But what if you could predict and counter those natural tendencies? What if you could design specific tactics to neutralize each species' advantages while exploiting their weaknesses? The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. The implications were staggering. An enemy that could custom design strategies for each species would be nearly unstoppable. Assuming your analysis is correct, Admiral Korvekstar said slowly, what do you recommend? Maya hesitated. What she was about to suggest went against every military protocol she had ever learned. We give them what they want. Excuse me? Commander Yalkrin asked. We let them study us, Maya clarified. But we control what they learn. General Thisara's armored form shifted aggressively. That's absurd. You're suggesting we intentionally expose our tactical capabilities to a hostile force? I'm suggesting we expose the tactical capabilities we want them to see, Maya corrected. Human military doctrine has always emphasized deception and misdirection. What if we applied that principle on a scale they've never encountered? Admiral Korvekstar leaned forward. Elaborate. Maya took a deep breath. We stage a series of engagements designed to teach them false information about our capabilities. Make them think Catherian forces are slower than they actually are. Convince them that Graxian coordination has specific weaknesses that don't really exist. Lead them to believe that human unpredictability follows certain patterns. And then, Commodore Velthash asked, then when they attack based on what they think they've learned, we reveal our actual capabilities and destroy them. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya could see the conflict in the faces around her, the logical appeal of her strategy warring, with their instinctive rejection of anything that looked like cooperation with the enemy. The risks are enormous, General Thisara pointed out. If we misjudge their capabilities or they see through our deception, we could lose everything. If we fight them conventionally, we lose anyway, Maya replied. They've already observed our standard tactics. They know how we think, how we respond to threats. Our only advantage is that they don't know we know what they're doing. Admiral Korvexistar studied the tactical display for several minutes. How long would this deception campaign require? 72 hours minimum, Maya estimated. Long enough for them to believe they have comprehensive data, but not so long that they lose interest or become suspicious. And if you're wrong about their intentions? General Thesera demanded. Maya met the general's gaze steadily. Then you can court-martial me posthumously. Despite everything, several officers chuckled at that. The tension in the room eased slightly. Admiral Korvextar made his decision. We'll implement a modified version of Cadet Chen's plan. Each species will prepare deception scenarios designed to mislead the enemy about our true capabilities. But we'll also maintain conventional battle plans as backup options. Sir, General Thesera protested, this entire strategy depends on the analysis of a first-year cadet. No offense to Cadet Chen, but... General, the Admiral interrupted, Cadet Chen's tactical analysis has been proven correct in every engagement so far. More importantly, she's the only one who's been thinking like our enemy instead of like ourselves. As the meeting broke up and officers began planning their deception scenarios, Maya remained behind, staring at the tactical display. Commander Yalkarin approached her. Second thoughts? He asked. Constantly, Maya admitted. But what scares me most isn't the possibility that I'm wrong. It's the possibility that I'm right and this works. Why would success scare you? Maya turned to face him. Because if we can fool an enemy this advanced, what does that say about us? How many of our own victories have been based on deception, rather than genuine superiority? The question hung between them as they looked out at the stars, where an alien fleet waited patiently to complete its study of galactic military capabilities. In 72 hours, they would learn whether humanity's greatest strength was its adaptability or its capacity for self-deception. Maya wasn't sure which answer would be worse. The deception campaign began at 600 Standard Time with what appeared to be a routine Catherian assault formation. Maya watched from the tactical center aboard the Indomitable, while as General Thesera led her forces in a seemingly straightforward attack on the enemy's outer perimeter. But everything about the assault was carefully choreographed lies. The Catherian ships moved slower than their actual capabilities. Their formation spacing suggested vulnerabilities that didn't exist, and their weapons targeting patterns implied limitations that were entirely fictional. To any observer, it would appear that Catherian tactics were powerful but predictable and slow to adapt. The enemy responded exactly as Maya had predicted, sending small groups of ships to test the Catherian formation's weak points. Each test revealed carefully planted false information about armor capabilities, weapon ranges, and coordination protocols. Phase 1 complete, reported Commander Yalkarin. Enemy forces have engaged and withdrawn. Intelligence suggests they're analyzing the data they collected. How convincing was the performance? Admiral Korvexter asked. Maya studied the sensor readings from the engagement. Too convincing. They bought everything we showed them. Which means either they're incredibly naive or they're playing a deeper game than we realized. Explain, the Admiral demanded. A truly advanced intelligence gathering operation would be suspicious of information that came too easily. The fact that they accepted our deceptions without question suggests they might be feeding us false confidence. Before anyone could respond, the enemy fleet began moving again. This time they approached the Graxian squadrons positioned on the opposite side of the formation. Phase 2 initiating, announced Commodore Velthash. Graxian forces will demonstrate false coordination weaknesses and technological limitations. Maya watched as the multi-armed Graxian commanders put on an elaborate show of communication difficulties and targeting delays. Their ships moved with perfectly choreographed clumsiness, suggesting that their advanced coordination capabilities were actually hindrances in fast-moving combat situations. The enemy response was swift and analytical. They probed the Graxian formations with precision strikes designed to test specific weaknesses. Each probe was met with exactly the false response the Allied forces had prepared. They're learning everything we want them to learn, Jixmar observed. his silicon form flickering with data processing. Success rate is 97%. That's what worries me, Maya muttered. Phase 3 commencing, announced Commander Thassara. Zilani forces implementing psychological warfare deception. The crystalline Zilani ships began broadcasting false psychic signatures, creating the impression that their mental abilities were both more limited and more predictable than they actually were. They staged several incidents of apparent psychic feedback and confusion, suggesting that their telepathic coordination could be disrupted by specific types of interference. Again, the enemy forces responded with clinical precision, testing each apparent weakness thoroughly before withdrawing to analyze their findings. Final phase, Admiral Korvex-Tar announced. Human forces will demonstrate false unpredictability patterns. This was the most complex deception of all. Maya had spent hours planning scenarios that would make human tactical thinking appear to follow certain predictable patterns while hiding their true adaptive capabilities. The human ships began a series of seemingly random maneuvers that actually contained subtle mathematical progressions, designed to suggest that human unpredictability was actually based on specific psychological responses to stress. The enemy fleet's response to this phase was different. Instead of quick probes and withdrawals, they engaged in extended observation. Their sensors focused intently on the human formations. They're spending more time studying us, Commander Yalkrin observed. Of course they are, Maya replied grimly. Humans are the wild card. We're the species that doesn't fit their models. Is that good or bad? Jixmar asked. I'll tell you in about 6 hours, Maya said. The enemy fleet completed their observations and withdrew to their staging area at the edge of the system. For 12 hours they remained completely silent, their ships motionless except for what appeared to be internal reconfigurations. They're redesigning their ships based on what they've learned, Maya announced after studying the sensor readings. Look at these energy signatures. They're modifying their weapon systems, their defensive capabilities, even their formation structures. All according to the false information we fed them? Admiral Korvexter asked hopefully. I think so, Maya said uncertainly. But there's no way to be sure until they attack. The attack came 18 hours later, and it was unlike anything the Allied forces had ever encountered. The enemy ships approached in formations specifically designed to counter what they believed were the weaknesses of each species. Against the Catherians, they used hit-and-run tactics designed to exploit false speed limitations. Against the Graxians, they employed jamming techniques meant to disrupt coordination systems that were actually decoys. Against the Zilanis, they broadcast psychic interference that was perfectly tuned to disrupt abilities the crystalline beings didn't actually possess. And against the humans, they used mathematical prediction algorithms based on false patterns Maya had spent days creating. It's working, General Thassara announced with savage satisfaction as her forces tore through enemy formations that were completely unprepared for the Catherians' actual capabilities. They're fighting ghosts. The battle turned into a rout. Enemy ships designed to counter false weaknesses found themselves facing real strengths they had never observed. Their carefully planned tactics crumbled as each species revealed capabilities that hadn't existed in the deception scenarios. Enemy fleet in full retreat, reported Commodore Velthash. Multiple vessels destroyed, remainder fleeing toward hyperspace jump points, but Maya felt no victory. Something was wrong. The enemy retreat was too organized, too controlled. Ships that should have been panicking were maintaining formation and covering each other's withdrawal. Admiral, she said urgently, we need to pursue immediately. Don't let them escape. Cadet Chen, we've won a decisive victory. Why risk our forces in a pursuit? Because they're not defeated, Maya insisted. Look at their retreat pattern. They're not running away. They're conducting a controlled withdrawal while continuing to gather data. As if summoned by her words, the enemy ships suddenly stopped their retreat and began broadcasting on all frequencies. The message was short and delivered in perfect galactic standard. Thank you for the comprehensive demonstration of galactic military capabilities. The data collected will prove invaluable for future operations. This concludes our research at this location. The transmission ended and the enemy fleet vanished into hyperspace. The silence on the bridge was absolute. Maya felt sick as the implications sank in. They hadn't been fighting a real battle. They had been participating in the final examination of an intelligence-gathering operation that had lasted for weeks. They knew, Admiral Korvex-Tar said slowly. They knew we were feeding them false information. Worse than that, Maya replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They let us think we were deceiving them while they learned our actual capabilities. Every move we made, every tactic we revealed to counter their false weaknesses, all of it was real data about our true strengths. But they lost ships, General Tisara protested. They took casualties, did they? Maya asked. Or did they sacrifice obsolete vessels to maintain the illusion that they were falling for our deception? Look at the debris patterns. Most of the ships they lost were already showing signs of system failures before the battle even began. The horrifying truth settled over the command center like a physical weight. They had been outmaneuvered on a scale that defied comprehension. While they thought they were conducting a deception campaign, they had actually been providing their enemies with a complete catalog of galactic military capabilities under real combat conditions. What do we do now? Commander Yalkrin asked. Maya stared at the empty space where the enemy fleet had been. We prepare for the real war, because now they have everything they need to design perfect weapons against every species in the galaxy. And us? Admiral Korvexter asked. What about humanity? Maya's answer was quiet but certain. We do what we've always done when facing impossible odds. We adapt faster than they think we can, and we make sure the next time we meet we're not the same species they studied. For the first time since the crisis began, she smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. 3 months after the incident at New Geneva, Maya stood before the Galactic Defense Council in a chamber that had witnessed the declaration of 3 interstellar wars. Representatives from 47 different species filled the massive amphitheater. Their attention focused on the small human who had become the youngest strategic advisor in galactic history. The situation is worse than we initially believed, Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. Our analysis of the enemy's capabilities suggests they didn't just study our current military doctrines. They studied our capacity for adaptation itself. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. Ambassador Krathul, a massive Catherian whose scarred armor marked him as a veteran of the frontier wars, raised his primary arm. Explain what you mean by studying our adaptation capacity, Advisor Chen. Maya activated the holographic display that dominated the center of the chamber. Every species evolves different survival strategies. Catherians developed overwhelming physical power. Graxians created sophisticated coordination abilities. Zelanis mastered psychological manipulation. But humans developed something unique, the ability to fundamentally change how we think and fight within a single generation. And the enemy has learned to predict even that? Asked Counselor Velsera, a crystalline Zelani whose mental abilities allowed her to speak for her entire delegation simultaneously. Worse, Maya replied. They've learned to weaponize it. Look at these battle simulations. The display showed tactical scenarios that made several council members recoil in shock. Enemy forces that could shift their entire combat doctrine mid-battle. Ships that reconfigured themselves to counter strategies they had never encountered before. Weapons that adapted to defenses faster than those defenses could adapt to them. They're not just predicting our adaptations, Maya continued. They're staying one step ahead of them. Every time we change our approach, they've already prepared 3 counters for the change we're most likely to make. Director Thosek of the Galactic Military Academy leaned forward. Then conventional military response is impossible. How do we fight an enemy that learns faster than we can adapt? We don't fight them, Maya said simply. The silence that followed was deafening. Ambassador Krathul's voice boomed across the chamber. Are you suggesting surrender? I'm suggesting evolution, Maya replied. They've studied every military capability we possess. They know how every species in this chamber thinks, fights, and adapts. But they studied us as separate entities. They've never encountered what happens when all our species truly work together. The Alliance has been cooperating for centuries, pointed out Senator Jixmol, a Nethrix whose silicon form flickered with skepticism. No, Maya shook her head. We've been coordinating. Catherians fight like Catherians, Graxians fight like Graxians, humans fight like humans. And then we combine our efforts. But what if we stopped being individual species and became something new? She manipulated the display to show new tactical formations that looked unlike anything in military history. Hybrid strategies that combined Catherian strength with Graxian coordination and human adaptability. Ships crewed by mixed species where each being contributes their natural advantages to a collective whole that thinks and fights in ways no single species could achieve. That's impossible. Director Thosick protested. Different species can't integrate at that level. Our biological and psychological differences are too great. Are they? Maya asked. Humans have been working alongside other species for generations. We've learned to think like Catherians when we need strength, like Graxians when we need coordination, like Zelanis when we need psychological insight. But we're still recognizably human. What if we went further? The implications of what she was suggesting began to sink in. Counselor Velsara's crystalline form pulsed with uncertainty. You're talking about fundamental changes to how our species interact. The social and political ramifications alone are irrelevant if we're all dead, Maya interrupted. The enemy expects to face the same species they studied at New Geneva. Give them something they've never seen before. And you believe this. Hybrid approach would be effective? Ambassador Craythul asked. I believe it's our only chance, Maya replied. They can predict how humans adapt because they studied human adaptation patterns. They can counter Catherian strength because they understand how Catherians use strength. But they've never seen a tactical doctrine that draws on the strengths of all our species simultaneously while minimizing the weaknesses of each. How would such integration even be possible? Senator Jixamal asked. Maya smiled, and for the first time since New Geneva, it was a genuinely hopeful expression. We start with what we already know works. Mixed crews on military vessels, joint tactical planning, combined training exercises. But we go deeper. We create new command structures where decisions are made by multi-species teams thinking as single units. We develop weapons and ships designed for crews that can simultaneously process information like Graxians, react like Catherians, adapt like humans, and coordinate like Zelanis. She paused, letting the concept sink in. The enemy studied 47 different species. They've never studied a single species that thinks with 47 different minds. Director Thosick manipulated his own display controls. The training requirements alone would take years. Biological compatibility issues, communication barriers, command hierarchy problems. 6 months, Maya interrupted. We've run preliminary simulations using Academy cadets. Mixed species teams consistently outperform monospecies teams by 40% after just 3 months of intensive integration training. You've already been testing this? Ambassador Craythul asked. Since the day we returned from New Geneva, Maya confirmed. The Academy's Advanced Strategic Planning Program has been redesigned around multi-species integration. The results have been remarkable. She activated new displays showing training footage that left the council members stunned. Academy cadets from different species moving with perfect coordination, making tactical decisions too quickly for individual biological processing, anticipating each other's actions with an almost telepathic precision. They're fighting like a single organism, Counselor Velsara whispered. Exactly, Maya said. And that's just the beginning. Give us 6 months to properly implement galaxy-wide integration protocols, and we can field military forces that think and fight in ways the enemy has never encountered. And if you're wrong? Director Thosick demanded. If this integration fails or proves ineffective, then we lose exactly what we would have lost fighting conventionally, Maya replied. But if we're right, we don't just defeat this enemy. We become something new, something stronger than any single species could be alone. The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Species representatives argued about sovereignty, biological compatibility, command structures, and resource allocation. But in the end, the mathematics were undeniable. Conventional military response had failed. Integration represented their only hope for survival. The vote was unanimous. As the council session ended and representatives began coordinating the massive transformation of galactic military doctrine, Maya stood alone in the great chamber. Ambassador Craythul approached her, his massive form moving with surprising gentleness. You realize what you've started? He asked. This won't just change how we fight. It will change who we are as species. Maya nodded. I know, but maybe that's what we needed anyway. Maybe the enemy did us a favor by forcing us to become more than what we were. And if they return during the integration period, before we're ready? Maya looked up at the massive Catherian warrior who could have crushed her with one hand but now sought her guidance in matters of life and death. Then, they'll face something they've never studied before, she said quietly. 47 species with nothing left to lose and everything to gain by working together. She smiled. And this time Ambassador Craythul found himself smiling back. despite everything. Besides, Maya added, they made one critical error in their analysis, which was, they assumed that humans would react to this threat like any other species, with fear, defensiveness, traditional responses. But humans don't just adapt to survive threats. We adapt to eliminate them, and now we're teaching everyone else how to do the same. Looking out at the stars where an unknown enemy waited, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced since the academy: genuine confidence. They had 6 months to become something new, something unprecedented in galactic history. She intended to make sure it was something their enemies would regret studying. The cadet they had laughed at was about to reshape the galaxy itself, and this time, she wouldn't be fighting alone.